Why, hello, Clarice. All right, it's all about the tip, she said to my, oh wait, never mind. Different piece, I'm sorry. Alright, this song I wrote this week. It's called Pretty Fast for a Pervert. The redhead crossed Maine against the light, keeping an eye on the man on the bench. She intended to give him a piece of her mind. She'd watched him a while over there, sipping his coffee like he wasn't doing anything weird, but then he'd look up, grope for the camera hanging around his neck, and she knew he was taking pictures of people walking past. She bet that not a one of them knew he was doing it. Good heavens, there were children nearby. And he looked like some kind of pervert there with his camera. She was miffed. Somebody needed to do something. As she reached the curb, she considered calling the police. They'd know what to do with him for sure. Probably had all sorts of dealings with perverts like him. She liked the idea of him being thrown in the back of a cruiser in handcuffs. They'd rough him up and toss him in a cell, maybe with a murderer. Some big guy with a beard and face tattoos and a thing for killing deviants. He wouldn't last 10 minutes with a guy like that, and it was just what he deserved, the sick puppy. What the redhead saw next stopped her cold. Across the street she hadn't noticed, but as she drew closer, it became apparent and confirmed her suspicion. He had a mustache. It figured.
He had a mustache.
First the camera and now this. If she wasn't certain before that he was a twisted predator, she now had all the proof she needed. Only creeps and serial killer rapists had facial hair like that. There was no time to wait for the police. Where's that guy from Chicago? Oh, it was up to her to stop him. Her hesitation cost her precious time. A family approached from her right. Two younger parents in North Face jackets herded three chattering kids along the sidewalk, and I can't see. I'm sorry. Oh my God. Unaware of the pervert watching them, she waited for them to pass, noting the disinterest on his face, the casual way he got up from the bench and nodded to someone as he walked past a coffee shop. Oh, he was good. She'd heard stories about men like him slithering through the streets and taking pictures of total strangers out minding their own business. She never thought she would see one here so close to home, but it just went to show that nowhere is safe any longer. After the young family moved past her, the redhead fell in behind, not too close, but near enough to keep up. He moved pretty fast for a pervert. The redhead pushed herself, but soon he was a half a block ahead of her. Every time he stopped to glance around, she thought she'd catch up a little, and something would happen. Crossing signals turned against her. People came out of stores. Groups crossed in front of her. One lady stopped to tie a shoe, almost causing the redhead to trip. She never seemed to gain any ground, and at one point she lost sight of him completely. She hurried to round the corner where she'd last seen him and came out into full sunshine. She shaded her eyes and studied the people across the street. Several teenagers waited for the signal to cross. God damn, man. Boys in big pants and girls in little skirts, and just as she stepped into the crosswalk, they came at her, strung out in ones and twos, little gaps between them. So still with her hand to her forehead, she decided he had crossed the street, and when she was about a third of the way across, she saw him. Her heart stopped. He was facing her, holding his camera up. One of the teens brushed past, and there she was, in full stride. The stripes of the crosswalk stretched across the street. She, moving against a stream of teenagers, her hand up, looking while they watched their own feet. That son of a bitch. He lowered his camera slowly, a half smile on his lips beneath that horrid mustache, and he looks dead into her eyes for a full second. She stared back until he nodded and turned away. She knew he had taken a picture of her, and she hadn't been able to stop it. He had no business doing anything of the sort. She wanted to scream, to point him out to people as the danger to society he was. She balled her fist and walked as fast as she could move her feet, listening to the raging labor of her lungs and the frenzied beating of her heart. He wouldn't get away with that. She caught up with him at a sidewalk cafe. He sat at a table near the curb, his back to the street. The camera rested on the table in front of him, and he looked to be talking to a pretty waitress near the door. The redhead, trying to catch her breath, slowed as she got close. She saw a truck waiting for the light to turn. People stepped past her, threading along the curb, not knowing what she knew, how near they were to danger. A young couple sat at a nearby table, sat close together. The girl had her hand on her young man's shoulder. She leaned in as if to kiss him, and the redhead saw the man with the mustache lift his camera from the table. She stepped forward quickly, bumping against the waitress, and put her hands out. She wanted to block him, and when he leaned away, still holding the camera, she pushed him. He was off balance and went over easily, backwards, trying to grab at his table, her hands, anything. He dropped the camera, and it hit the sidewalk as he landed half in the street, his head bouncing once on the pavement. His eyes locked on hers, and the last look on his face before the shadow of the rushing truck darkened over him was of confusion. The redhead heard screaming, and she felt someone pull at her arms. She saw the man lying still and his camera on the sidewalk. The truck had stopped and its driver jumping from the cab. She looked at the young couple. The girl was crying, and her young man had his arm around her as if to protect her, and the redhead understood. It had been very close. Thank you. There is nobody left.